So as I go through some of these challenges, I'll be talking a little bit about our process as well. So not understanding how financial aid works. So we're not talking just about FAFSA. We're not talking about just about the forms. We're talking about financial aid and how it works. So financial aid 101, we want to go through here, right? Talk about some of these things here. So I have a particular student that we were working with on the financial aid side. And where I really want you to focus your attention, this is a college here in Southern California. For those of you that are familiar with California colleges, this is a Cal State Fullerton. And as you see on the screen, what I really want you to do is on the very top right where it says Fullerton, look at the graduation rates, right? 4 years, 6 years, you got 4 years, 23% grad rate. 4 years, right? 4 year degree, 23% of their students are graduating in 4 years. And 69, 70%. So only 7 out of 10 students are graduating in 6 years. Think about that. But also, here's where I really want you to kind of focus your attention. You look in this red box here on the very left, at the bottom left hand, there's a lot of numbers over there. So if you're new to the financial aid world, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms as you're going through the whole college planning process. SAI, Student Aid Index, formerly known as EFC. There was a major FAFSA financial aid change about 2 years ago, and the new acronym is SAI, and they almost mean the same thing. And essentially, you want to have the lowest SAI you can possibly have, right? Or the lowest EFC, that's what it used to be, that you can possibly have. The lower your SAI, formerly known as EFC, the more aid eligible your student might be, right? And if you need more basics and foundational, I would say, information, definitely check out that YouTube channel that I mentioned. I talk a lot about that. Excuse me. So when it comes to this family's SAI, as you see the before SAI in this family, dad is self-employed. He's in the medical space. He has his own practice, makes good money. I would say right around take home is right around 200 to $250,000 a year, depending on the year. And they are as you see the before, it's $36,000. In other words, $36,000 is what the minimum at this particular college, at most Cal States, they will be expected to pay. 36,000 is what the government says they should be able to afford when it comes to this type of university. And through certain strategies, and we do this reporting for all our families, and this is another great resource for you, but through certain strategies and things that they can put in place before it's too late, they could potentially get that SAI down to zero. You see the before and after down to zero. So a zero SAI basically means they're 100% aid eligible. Now that zero could be a little aggressive, but they could probably get it to 5 or 10,000, which is still a significant difference between the initial 36,000 and what they possibly could have. So SAI is really where, when it comes to parents, this is where, and as far as our process, where we start. This is where we begin. We start focusing on, okay, if college were to begin tomorrow, right? What are we expected to pay? What are you going to be expected to pay? Whether you have an eighth grader, 10th grader, 12th grader, if college began tomorrow, do you know what you are expected to pay? And do you know why that is? In other words, why is that? Are you expected to pay that amount? And is there anything that you can do to reduce that amount? And a lot of times, believe it or not, even for very affluent families, there are things that they can do to legally and ethically reduce their SAI and become more aid eligible. This particular family, $36,000 difference based on the information that they provided. But if you look at the very bottom where it says total family contribution, the very bottom, they are in a situation where it doesn't really matter at this particular college. You see there, it's if they reduce their SAI to zero, they're still going to pay $27,000 out of pocket, right? So this is a little bit of a spoiler alert. I'm going to talk more about school selection, but this right here, when it comes to Cal State Fullerton, even if they had a zero SAI, they're still going to be almost a full pay family. Just because Cal State Fullerton, as you see right here, when I click over it, you see that we focus on the pie chart, they don't really meet a family's need at all. And if they do, it's about 1%. Of that 1%, about 74% is considered gift aid. So most families, regardless of how much money they need, how much need they're able to demonstrate at a college like this, at Cal State, for example, they're never going to get it. And this is really important to understand as you go through your process of school selection and building your list, budgeting, and you need to understand this as soon as possible so you know what to expect. And then we take the same family, but we look at a different college. We look at Duke University. Now, if you look at this on that far right hand corner, Duke University, you're looking at $87,000 is the cost to attend Duke, right? So most people wouldn't even consider Duke because it's almost $90,000 a year. I'm not applying to Duke. You're not applying to Duke, son, daughter, student, because we can't afford that. But also look below that 87,000 and you're at an 88% graduation rate in 4 years. Almost nine of their students out of 10 are graduating in 4 years. And then another, almost 100% of them are graduating in 6 years. That is a huge deal. The most expensive years that you will pay in college are the last years 5 years, 6 years 7, depending on how long your student is in college. But also notice in the bottom right hand corner, right, that box again, look at their SAI, right? The SAI is about 50% less, $19,000 the before and down to 2,600 the after. But if we just focus on the before SAI, why is that? Why at one college it's 36,000, at another college it's under 20? Well, because they have two different formulas, right? They're looking at two different things. Cal State Fullerton is looking primarily at the FAFSA, whereas Duke University is looking at the FAFSA. In addition to that, the CSS Profile. So they're looking at different things and they have a different, I would say, algorithm or calculation on how they determine if a student is going to be aid eligible or not. But also notice the after is $2,600. And when you look at the very bottom, the total contribution right here, again, at the bottom of my screen, you are noticing, sorry for my scribble, I'm not the most artistic, but when it comes to their total family contribution, even if it was just a before, it's only $19,000. You're telling me that Duke University is less expensive than Cal State Fullerton? Now, for me as a parent, I need to figure out how do I get my kid into Duke, right? How do we get them accepted into Duke? And I know for many of you here that are North Carolina fans, Duke is just an example that we're using. Okay, it's just an example, right? NC State fans out there, they're just if you Duke is probably the most hated college basketball program, and if you are one of those people who hate Duke, this is just an example. But if you love Duke, go Duke, right? Go blue. So but then notice that after, right, with certain strategies, they were able to reduce that from 19,000 down to even 2,650, under $3,000. That's a tenth of what Cal State Fullerton will cost. Not to mention, the student has the ability to graduate in about 4 years, most likely. So we want to understand these details and we want to look at side by side comparisons as we go through our process, your process. And again, when we work with families and when we work with parents, this is where we start. We start getting all those facts and figures and get a good understanding of what's going to happen when that time comes and how to prepare for it and or reduce that expected out-of-pocket expense. So, but also notice with Duke University, the reason why they it's so much less expensive is because they provide about 100% of need if a family is able to demonstrate that. In this particular case, this is a pretty affluent family here in Southern California, but they're still able to qualify for need-based aid at Duke University, which is pretty cool. So without any strategies, without doing anything differently, but just based on school selection in this particular case. So what I always encourage you to do as a family, get this information, right? And these are, I would say, screenshots of a 30, 40 page report, but we provide this at no cost to all the families that we consult with. So if this is something that you're interested in getting, definitely book that strategy session and we'll make sure we get you the information that you're looking for. So now, even high income families can qualify for aid. Now, this is another family I want to tell you about. Student is Lacey. Now, what you're looking at here, for those of you that are new, is a student aid report. And this is just an example. This is, a couple of years ago, a few years ago, but as an example, this family also very affluent. They lived in Laguna Beach here in Southern California and made really good money. Actually lived right off PCH, so have a pretty view of the water, ocean, self-employed as well. And but just notice the FAFSA right here. The SAR is saying what the student is eligible for. So right here in that little the EFC that we used to call it, it was about $98,000, a $98,000 EFC, and but that was highly inflated. I had the opportunity to meet with this family and consult with this family, and we noticed that they made some costly mistakes. And notice here that we were able to get that EFC down to under $40,000. So it went from 98,000 to 37,000, right? I think that's about a $60,000 difference in what they were expected to pay. And having a $98,000 EFC is high no matter what college your student is looking to attend. So we want to talk about planning and making sure your student is prepared to fill out those forms so they're in the best situation possible. And Chapman University is a college the student is attending or attended, and they only use the FAFSA, but it was also a pretty pricey private university. And if you can see on the screen here, that's her award letter. She was able to get about 33, 34, almost $34,000 in aid because they made some of those important changes to their financial information on the FAFSA, which made the student more aid eligible, put them in a much better situation. They saved about $20,000 a year while the student was attending Chapman University, which is pretty cool. So just the point is, even wealthy families have the opportunity to get financial aid. They just have to, go about it the right way. So what we did is we carefully reviewed her FAFSA and corrected key reporting errors that we see almost all the time, every year. A lot of families make, these mistakes. Guided the family through a detailed appeal and verification process with the university. Updated the FAFSA for more accurate SAI, or at the time it was an EFC. And then we helped them source and revise award packages that significantly reduce their cost. And then, as a result, Lacey was able to attend her dream college for less than it was initially or, originally projected. And they're in the best situation possible. So a little quote there from the family. But the whole point is, again, planning process definitely creates, a good opportunity when it comes to aid eligibility and receiving financial aid. So can anybody here, and you don't have to add this to the comment, but maybe you think about this, if you want to add it to the comment, please do. What are the biggest financial aid mistakes that at least most people make, or that you think people would make on a regular basis, or I would say consistently on an annual basis we see families do? What are some of the biggest financial aid mistakes that people make? And it might surprise you. It's going to be probably a lot simpler than you think. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that, or even add it to the comments or to the chat if you can. All right. So biggest financial aid mistakes. If the little drum roll out there, it is number two. Pretty simple, right? Not completing the FAFSA. I mean, I hear from families all the time, should we do it? We got all these mixed reviews and opinions and feedback. I'm telling you, if you care about cost, you should complete the FAFSA, but you should do it the right way. A lot of families don't understand that colleges, the more information they have and the more they see that you can actually afford college, sometimes that can increase your students' likely of getting accepted at that college when they're not so dependent on financial aid. So everything really depends, right? It's a case by case scenario, but in most situations, it does make sense and it matters that you complete the FAFSA. It actually does more help than it does harm when it comes to your students' chances of not only getting aid, but also just getting accepted. So yes, not completing the FAFSA is a huge mistake that families make all the time, more common in your more affluent families that don't want to share their information. We don't want the college knowing how much we earn or how much we have saved. That's private information, and a lot of times they pay the price for not doing so. But the number one thing that leads me into is not planning for FAFSA. So the planning is really where the magic happens. It's not so much the form. The form, for the most part, is simple, and it was simplified a couple years ago when they made the huge changes to FAFSA. It's more about the planning that goes into it, the things that we just talked about. If college were to begin tomorrow, what are you expected to pay? What can you do about that? And okay, what does that look like, and why? What is the context behind the content? I would say the numbers. So think of it. What I tell a lot of people to do is you think of it like taxes. Most people have no problem doing TurboTax. You can file your own taxes with TurboTax, right? But if you have somewhat of a unique situation, right? Your income may be kind of high, or you have investments, or you may be self-employed. It's the planning that you want to do when it comes to taxes before you file your taxes. You want to pay as little in taxes as you possibly can while still being A, ethical, B, legal, right? You don't want to get in trouble, but you want to do the planning before you submit the forms. Same thing as it pertains to FAFSA. It doesn't guarantee you're going to qualify for 100%, or you're not going to have to pay anything out of pocket. It just puts you in a better situation to qualify for more aid, saving you more money out of pocket. And then when we talk about what does it cost you, right? When you overpay. So what's the true cost of overpaying for college? If you were to overpay by just $6,000 in financial aid a year, if you missed out on $6,000 in financial aid, and that's pretty conservative. In certain situations, families are overpaying by $10,000 to $20,000 a year. But if it's just $6,000 a year by over 5 years, that equates to $30,000, right? Pretty simple math. If your kid is graduating in 5 years, you paid $6,000 more than you had to each year. That's what you're looking at. But is that the true cost, right? What did that overpayment really cost you? Now, if you are looking to retire one day and you have a 401k or you have investments, that $6,000 a year at 6% in interest rate, which most people feel over 30 years they can earn 6%, it costs you about $100,000 more. It costs you about $130,000 in lost retirement money or lost opportunity costs, right? So you may have only overpaid 30 grand, but the impact is more like 130 grand when you look at the big picture and the large grand scheme of things. So not overpaying is really the objective, right? Is the goal. So going into the challenge.